Diamo inizio al 36esimo concerto
Let's start the
musicale
36th
e
Christmas
salutiamo
concert,
subito il
and we would like to
Sua Maestà
welcome His
Abdullah
Majesty
Hussein, re di
Abdullah Hussein,
Giordania,
King of
in
Jordan,
collegamento da Amman.
from Amman.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Father Baroni, Cardinal Bassetti, Secretary General, my friends, the Lamp of Peace is a doubly meaningful award. Those who are honored to receive it are also welcomed to help pass it forward. Nothing is more appropriate to peace, nothing more expresses our human bonds, and nothing is more true to the common teachings of our different religions than to give of what we receive. So I am humbled to join you today to help pass the lamp of peace to a man who has devoted his whole life to serving others. A man I am proud to call my dear friend, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Your Excellencies, you have waited a long time for this day. For almost 2 years, a global plague has delayed it. All that time, our world has been challenged to work together, challenged to find answers, and above all, challenged to help the most vulnerable on an equal basis with those who have much. And even today, we are forced to meet remotely as this global pandemic continues to impact our world. Yet other dangers also cry out for serious attention. Violent regional conflicts with global reach, a global refugee crisis, and the threat of extremist violence and hatred, and the urgent crisis of climate change. The lives of our children and the hope for our future depend on what we do now. So, my friends, that message has been the consistent call of the Secretary General, urging our world forward to make real the enduring shared values of peace, justice, mercy, and mutual respect. And long before he was Secretary General, he championed these values in his home city, Lisbon, his country, Portugal, the EU, and across the world. As UN High Commissioner for Refugees, he worked tirelessly to deal with a surging global refugee crisis, reaching out to refugees with compassion and empathy. And I can attest personally to his concern, not only for refugees, but for the tremendous sacrifices of people in host countries like Jordan. When he was elected to serve as UN Secretary General, he brought to the job a deep understanding of the importance of collective action to counter critical issues. And he has also warned against the threats to our unity, ignorance, hatred, and polarization. And of course, he is a true peacemaker. In my region, the Middle East, the Secretary General has been unwavering in his support for political resolutions to conflicts, including the two-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the only way towards a future of security and peace for both sides. And he has been a strong voice for international law and the protection of Jerusalem, maintaining the security and status quo of its holy sites. My friends, in my faith, Islam, we are commanded to be kind not only to the neighbor who is near, but to the neighbor who is a stranger. Not only to the friend at the other side, but to the wayfarer who passes by. Such a teaching is part of every major faith in our world. And this compassion is clearly known well by the man we honor today. The people of the world have been fortunate twice. First, to have a UN Secretary General with such tremendous empathy and vision. And second, to have a great advocate for the values we share. I am so proud to pass to my dear friend the lamp of peace.
And now the floor to Brother Marco Moroni, the custodian of the Sacred Convent of St. Francis, for his welcoming speech and for reading the motivations for the conferral of the Lamp of Peace to the Secretary General on behalf of the Franciscan community of the Sacred Convent. You have the floor. Most excellent guests, sisters and brothers, all present here today, and those who follow us through the media, on behalf of the community of the Sacred Convent, welcome. Brother Francis is pleased to welcome you to the house where his body has rested for almost 8 centuries, and where, in his memory and honor, great artists have created their most significant works. Francis of Assisi nourished a tender affection for Jesus, and the humility of his incarnation was so impressed in his memory that he could hardly think of anything else. And above all other solemnities, he celebrated the birth of the child Jesus with ineffable care, and he called this the Feast of Feasts, the day in which God, having become a little infant, had sucked on a human breast. This is the fundamental event to the history of the world that we want to celebrate this year too, through the traditional concert that sees us gathered here today. For us, it is He, Jesus, God's gift of love for humanity, the Prince of Peace, the light of the peoples, who offers us the coordinates to cultivate actions and projects of sharing and peace in a world that, despite the devastation brought by 2 years of pandemic, is still struggling to identify paths of reconciliation and solidarity. Indeed, we could draw up, once again, an almost infinite list of social, political, and economic problems that necessarily concern us all closely. Given that, as Pope Francis reminds us, everything is connected. Ethnic conflicts, accentuation of corporate interests, particularisms, populisms, sovereignties, violations of the most elementary human rights, increasingly marked polarizations, growing economic inequalities, indiscriminate exploitation of resources and of the land, our common home, raising barriers, refusing to welcome those who knock on the doors of our countries. All these because of selfish interest on a personal, social, and institutional level. This is known all too well, especially to the victims, who pay the consequences themselves. Much more is daily represented and shown by the media, while other reasons of conflict are hidden, underground, but maybe even more deleterious. Pope Francis himself offers a profound analysis of the situation in the encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti, which was signed right here at the foot of the tomb of St. Francis on October the 3rd last year. In the face of all this, there is no lack of men and women animated by a spirit of self-denial and capacity for sacrifice. Groups and associations moved by strong intuition and farsightedness. Institutions marked by inclusive and supportive ethical perspectives who work for the construction of a more just, peaceful humanity, respectful of the human person and his rights, as well as of the integrity of the whole creation. We recognize in you, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, the distinctive traits of a man who has lived a long political activity as a vocation at the service of the common good. For this reason, on this occasion, we have decided to present you with the lamp of peace, already conferred in the past to other eminent personalities, particularly active in the research and in the promotion of peace, among them His Majesty Abdullah II, the King of Jordan. Unfortunately, you cannot be with us in person in Assisi, and I do hope there will be further opportunities, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Guterres, for the call we had yesterday. The motivation that led us to this recognition is your tireless work of political mediation in the complexity of our world, a commitment generously shared in a dialogical and heartfelt style, a style of fraternal humanism, as we, the friars of the Sacred Convent, call it. Fraternal humanism comes also from Assisi, by promoting, announcing, and proposing, following Jesus and at the service of our brothers in the style of Brother Francis, as we live an intercultural fraternity here in Assisi. Here there are 56 friars from 21 countries of the world. In a way, we are a small Franciscan United Nations. The encyclical Fratelli Tutti is a further responsibility for us to rethink the mysticism of fraternity, being aware that authentic fraternity is already an experience of God and a key to true humanism. Alongside with this, we would also like to recall and share some ideas recalled by Pope Francis in the video message on the occasion of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly on the 25th of September last year. The United Nations, as the Pope recalled, was created to unite nations, to bring them closer, as a bridge between peoples. Let's use it to transform the challenge we are facing into an opportunity to build together, once again, the future we want. We cannot help but see how international institutions are weakened today because the economic and financial sphere tends to predominate over politics. In this context of profound inequalities, aggravated by the efficiency paradigm of technocracy, it is necessary that the United Nations is reformed to give real concreteness to the concept of the family of nations, as Pope Francis said. There is no other way than to operate through the culture of fraternity on an international scale, the same culture that you, Mr. Guterres, with various initiatives, have tried to promote, while being aware that fraternity, unlike equality and freedom, cannot be imposed from above or from outside, because it is placed on the inner level of convictions and affectivity, bonding humanity as one family. Thank you. Thank you for your constant attention to walk the path of dialogue. May Jesus, who comes, the true light which lightens every man, keep inspiring you, Mr. Guterres, and all of us with bright sharing actions and projects for the construction of a more fraternal world. May God give you peace. Merry Christmas to everybody. And now the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Your Eminence Cardinal Gualtiero Bassetti, Your Majesty King Abdullah II, Minister Daniele Franco, Excellencies, dear brothers and sisters. È un grande onore.
It is a great honor and a privilege to join you for this ceremony. I would have liked to be with you in the beautiful Basilica of St. Francis. By honoring me, you are recognizing the work of all our United Nations personnel striving for peace around the world. Diplomats, humanitarians, development specialists, peacekeepers, who put themselves in harm's way to safeguard and promote peace. Please forgive me for switching into English at this point. I don't really speak Italian. Le Nazioni Unite sono
The horrors of two global wars that began in Europe. And peace remains our guiding star and most precious goal. We are united here today in our pursuit of peace. I thank King Abdullah for his efforts to promote peace on the global stage through his staunch support for international solutions, solidarity, dialogue, and human rights. And I express my gratitude to Father Moroni, Cardinal Bassetti, and all the Franciscans who are working around the world in the name of peace. I have very close links to the Franciscans through my lifelong friendship with Father Victor Melicius, a Franciscan priest who presided over both my wedding ceremonies, baptized my children, and celebrated Mass many times in my home. And as an Antonio from Lisbon, I have a strong connection with Santo Antonio, one of the first Franciscans. People from Lisbon and people from Padua may never agree on where Santo Antonio belongs, but of course, he belongs to the whole world. As a person of faith, with a deep appreciation and respect for the mission of St. Francis, this award and ceremony are especially meaningful. From the start as my mandate as Secretary General, I made promoting peace my first priority, having seen some of the worst impacts of conflict during my tenure as High Commissioner for Refugees. I launched a search in diplomacy for peace and putting greater emphasis on prevention, establishing more rigorous systems and frameworks to analyze risks, reinforce decision-making and support member states to take action before violence escalates. When COVID-19 first took hold, I understood it would be a new threat to peace and called immediately for a global ceasefire to fight our common enemy, the virus. Looking forward, I'm determined to use my second mandate to build on these initiatives through my good offices as an honest broker, a bridge builder, and a messenger for peace. But the struggle for peace is often a Sisyphean task, given the complexity of today's interlinked conflicts. We live in a world where peace is elusive and under enormous threat. Many countries and entire regions are suffering from prolonged conflicts with no end in sight. And in places that have not seen conventional war for decades, peace is routinely undervalued and undermined. And this lends even greater importance to moments like these, when we honor peace and reflect on our duty to uphold and promote it. Excellencies and dear brothers and sisters, Saint Francis of Assisi was a true visionary, whose holistic concept of peace is as relevant today as it was during his lifetime 800 years ago. The patron saint of ecology has much to teach us about making peace with nature. Our unsustainable production and consumption habits are causing a triple planetary crisis: climate disruption, a catastrophic loss of biodiversity, and levels of pollution that are killing millions every year. Pope Francis recognized this in his inspiring encyclica Laudato Si. Our war on nature threatens all human life together with many other animals and plant species. And climate disruption is unleashing wildfires, floods, droughts, and other extreme weather events that affect every continent. It contributes to a struggle for scarce resources like clean water and fertile land, which can easily erupt into violence and conflict. Last year, more than 30 million people were forced from their homes by climate-related disasters, many finding shelter in countries that are also affected by the climate emergency. This triple planetary crisis requires urgent action from everyone, from governments, international organizations, business, cities, and individuals. We need global solidarity, not only to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030, but to support communities and countries that are already reeling under the strain. And developing countries need urgent access to climate finance so that they can adapt their infrastructure and economies and build resilience. Climate action builds peace. Reforestation, water cooperation, and cross-border land management initiatives protect and restore nature while connecting communities with each other and with the natural world. This is the way of the future. Human well-being lies in restoring and protecting the health of our planet and everything on it. As St. Francis understood, there is a deep connection between living in harmony with our environment and in peace with each other. Excellencies, dear brothers and sisters, St. Francis was also ahead of his time in understanding the links between economic justice, humility, and peace. Today, rising levels of poverty, coupled with record levels of inequality, are a threat to peace at the global and local levels. Humility is out of fashion, but the COVID-19 pandemic has shown that it remains an imperative. Pride and overconfidence have seriously hampered the global response. A microscopic virus brought the world to its knees. 2 years on, we may wish we are done with COVID-19, but it is not done with us, and that's why I'm here. The pandemic has exploited the enormous inequalities in our world. Economic inequality enabled it to run rampant through the poorest countries and communities. Vaccine inequality has allowed it to continue mutating, possibly into variants that are more transmissible and more deadly. Inequality in global finance means the poorest countries are mirrored in debt, while the richest invest in a strong recovery. Even before the pandemic, people are losing faith in their institutions and representatives. And today there is widespread alienation and cynicism over leaders and elites who have failed to protect their people and act in the best interest of all. High levels of poverty and inequality are a direct assault on human rights. They are associated with poor health, increased levels of crime, corruption, and instability. And people who are marginalized and isolated are vulnerable to arguments that blame their misfortunes on others. It is no coincidence that the inequality crisis is coupled with rising levels of racism, extremism, and nationalism. At the same time, I'm inspired by leaders who are emerging from some of the least powerful groups and regions. Teenage girls are raising their voices and moving the world. The leaders of small island developing states are speaking truth to power. Children and young people, civil society, cities and communities, groups are joining together to stand up for human rights, climate action, and peace. St. Francis saw that peace was closely linked to humility and compassion for others. As Pope Francis has said, St. Francis, and I quote, shows us just how inseparable the bond is between concern for nature, justice for the poor, commitment to society, and interior peace. End of quote. Excellencies, dear brothers and sisters, from today's perspective, perhaps the most remarkable quality of St. Francis' vision of peace was its inclusivity. At a time of bloody and violent religious conflicts, when the dehumanization of Muslims and Jews was widespread in Europe, St. Francis chose to risk his life on a mission for peace in the Middle East. His meeting with Sultan al-Malik al-Kamil during the Fifth Crusade is an early model of interfaith dialogue that promoted tolerance, respect, and mutual understanding. St. Francis returned from Egypt to write about new ways in which his order, the Franciscans, could engage with Muslims revolutionary for its time. Scholars have even observed how his subsequent teachings were influenced by the Islamic call of prayer and by the traditional Islamic 99 names of God. His mission is a powerful example and lesson for all of us who strive for peace, particularly in the Middle East, where interreligious tensions and conflicts sadly continue. We can all play a role in ending the polarization that plagues many societies today. In response to the persecution of Christians, to rising anti-Muslim hatred, anti-Semitism, racism and xenophobia, we must all stand up for our common humanity. We must reject religious and political figures who exploit differences. It is essential that leaders of all kinds take responsibility, condemn all acts of violence and hatred, and address the root causes that undermine social cohesion. As societies become multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural, we need greater investment in inclusivity. Every group in society should feel that their individual identity is respected, while they are also valued members of the community as a whole. Tolerance is not enough. We must learn to respect each other and to love each other. Building bridges between the world's major faiths is one of the most important projects of our time. With their agreement on human fraternity for world peace and living together, signed 2 years ago, Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayeb, sent an important message of mutual respect, tolerance, compassion, and peace. Excellencies, dear brothers and sisters, allow me to close with a final thought. Peace makes demands of us, because peace is not a passive acceptance of the status quo. It is a concrete act, a choice, and sometimes, yes, a difficult one. But in our fractured, troubled world, it is a vital one. It is the only one. It remains a driving force within the work of the United Nations every day, in every country. I believe our world is truly committed to peace when media organizations employ not just war reporters, but peace reporters. When governments allocate money not only to defense budgets, but to peace budgets. As Pope Francis said in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, only by walking the path of peace in solidarity can we build a better future for all. Because peace can achieve wonders that war never will. Thank you once again for honoring me with this lamp of peace. In a world where we can choose anything, let us choose peace. Grazie mille.
And now, this is the moment for the conferral of the lamp. I'd like to ask the custodian, Brother Moroni. The chargé d'affaires for the King of Jordan, Mohammed al-Salah, the ambassador, who symbolically is going to give back the lamp of peace. And now, on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, I'd like to ask the Director General of the FAO, Professor Chu Dongju, Special Delegate to represent the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is the edition of the Lamp of Peace 2021 with the conferral to the Secretary General of the United Nations. And now the Director General of the FAO will pronounce a brief speech.
Abdullah II, King of Jordan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to accept the Lamb of Peace high recognition on behalf of UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. This ceremony, convened in this holy town, reflects the noble mandate of the United Nations and our collective mission for humanity. Sadly, the world is suffering from a rising number of hungry people. More than 811 million people on this planet go to bed hungry every night. The pandemic has caused the largest increase in global hunger in decades. 80% of the world's poorest live in the rural areas, and almost half of them are children under the age of 15. Conflict, humanitarian emergencies, climate crisis, economic downturns continue to undermine our efforts to end hunger, food insecurity, and inequalities. We must come together to do more to ensure that no one is left behind, especially the most vulnerable. As Pope Francis expressed in the Laudato Si, human beings, while capable of the worst, are also capable of rising above themselves, choosing again what is good and make a new start. Each of us has a role to play in lifting up those most in need. We need to transform agri-food system for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, a better life for all. We have only 9 harvests remain to achieve the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. I wish to conclude by conveying my sincere appreciation to the organizers of this important and special gathering. I wish to congratulate the UN Secretary-General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his inspiration, works for humanity, and commitment to world peace. I wish you all a healthy, safe, and peaceful festival season. Thank you. Grazie mille. Last night, I prepared my personal gift for you. I would like to translate. Holy land produce holy people. Here is a holy land. And the food security will assist the peace. And FAO, DG, Qudongyu, and the Year of the Cow. So this bilunar calendar of China is 15th of November. So today, you will see the full moon. So it's really 100% enjoyment, satisfaction, and thanks God bless Francis and also Christian and Muslim and Buddhist. Let's make the world peaceful and enjoyable, happy life. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we start with the Christmas concert. Just a moment of relax. And we'll prepare the screen and then we'll get started. Thank you.